Vampires and fantasy and other works of fiction are some of the most popular and powerful beasts that have ever been featured. They are huge in the gaming worlds of the Elder Scrolls and The Witcher, and they are huge in other series like the more, I guess, realistic approach in V-Wars, which is a series that I hope I get to finish one day, as I've only seen the first few episodes and I'm massively behind. But I think that vampires would be a great addition to the world of Black Clover. They would just be a perfect fit, and I want to go over why with the multiple reasons of what they would add to the series. In today's video, I'll be discussing vampires. Are they in Black Clover? If there's any information that really goes towards it, and also if they were in Black Clover, what would they do? Like, what would they kind of add to the series? So with that being said, guys, I do want to remind you that I am a certified personal trainer. So if you want to hire me as your online personal trainer, a link below to my website will be down there. And also, if you guys haven't heard of the app called Storyfire, you should probably download it. Storyfire is like the YouTube of writing stories. Basically, it's just an app. You go through it. It's also a browser, and you write stories. You read stories from people. Pretty fun app. But yeah, I've written 2 stories on this app. I wrote one 2 years ago. I won Story of the Week over thousands of stories. Then 2 weeks ago, I uploaded the first chapter, the prologue chapter of a book that I wrote or I've been writing, and it won Story of the Day. So I'm going to be uploading chapter 1, the essential second chapter of my book, this Saturday, and it's going to be in the afternoon. I believe it's going to be 5 p.m. Pacific time. And so if you want to read that, that'll be coming out then. So I suggest you download the Storyfire app, and then please go check out my story. It was Story of the Week Story of the Day last week. So if you could get Story of the Day or even Story of the Week again, that would be very much appreciated, everybody. But again, that is my story in Storyfire. My account's called Broku's Fable, and then the story is called Mist Adrift. With that being said, let's get into the video. So, vampires have been huge in fiction for a long time. We're talking about, pretty sure, over 100 years. There are so many different iterations, so many different types of vampires, and so many different types of powers. You have like the really basic types of vampires that are kind of, go back in the really old like movies, like the black and white films where they're like, they're maybe very human-like. They just can't go at night. You can't see them in mirrors. I mean, they can't go out in the day. You can't see them in mirrors. They're weak to garlic and steaks. And then they drink blood. And then over the years, they kind of developed more and more like powers and superpowers, and then tied more with magic. And then I've seen some of the crazy, like strong vampires, like from Vampire Hunter D, where they're like multiversal levels of power, and they're vampires. So vampires have a wide range of abilities. But I'm going to kind of take in the more general ones that are in most iterations, kind of add that to what they would be like in Black Clover. So if you took a normal person in Black Clover, and let's say they got bit by a vampire, what would kind of happen to them? Well, this would be a huge boost in power in multiple ways for them, as in general fantasy where vampires have increased physical strength from their previous human forms. So we know that in Black Clover, if you get a amp to your physical strength and stats, it is a pretty big boost. As one of the reasons why Yami is so strong is because his physical strength and physical stats are immense. Same with Asta. And so basically even Klaus has become a really strong character because of how much he trained his muscles. So if somebody got a physical strength increase in Black Clover, that would be big because physical strength is a big aspect. And then also in series where vampires exist in a more high fantasy series where there's magic and magic systems, generally a vampire is going to be better with magic than most humans. And generally what would happen is if a human became a vampire, they'd be better with magic. So let's say in this instance, if a human became a vampire in Black Clover, not only would their physical strength increase, but their magic power would increase. Their mana amount would increase. Their mana control would increase. So turning into a vampire would be a massive boost in power, and so that would make the vampire essentially a huge threat to the Clover Kingdom, the world at whole, and Black Clover. As you could have essentially a weak commoner, but if they get bit by a vampire, their physical strength increases, their magic power increases, and their magic control increases, and they have the ability to turn other people into vampires. That is what vampires can do. So vampires, they drink blood. That's how they, I guess, survive. Now that could be added into Black Clover, where if a vampire, if they drink the blood of another person and they kill them, it also absorbs their magical power. That's also one of the things that happens in many different fantasy iterations of vampires, is that if humans have magic, or just by drinking the blood of humans, they get even stronger with each human that they eat. And not only does it just keep them alive, it makes them even stronger. And then vampires also have the ability to sire other people to become vampires as well, as basically you can eat somebody's and drink somebody's blood and they die, or they turn into a vampire. So this essentially is almost like a pandemic level threat, because not only does this make a person stronger, but they can basically raise an entire army of people, and these people will be physically stronger, and they will have greater magic power overall. So I think that vampires would be a very huge threat, and it's almost like an exponential threat, because if you get one vampire, let's say they eat 10 people, or they consume the blood of 10 people, 2 of them turn to vampires, and now that original vampire has gotten stronger because they've consumed the mana and blood of a human. And then it just keeps getting higher and higher. It's like a snowball effect. They get more vampires, more and more vampires, and the vampires are getting stronger and stronger because they keep consuming the blood and mana of people. So this would be a huge threat. They could probably start pretty slow, but then would just go into a massive, like, pandemic level thing. And in my opinion, if done right, and if it gets like its own arc, it could be a better version of the Elven conflict. I'm not saying that it would be better than the Elven arc, I mean just like the elves in general as a threat. For example, if a good guy gets turned into a vampire, it's probably not going to be as reversible as it was for the actual elves, where Asta could just hit him with the Demon Destroyer sword. Also, it wouldn't be like essentially a elven soul taking over the body, and while that elven soul is different, it's still, I guess, somewhat similar to the original human soul, but it's still a completely different person. Whereas when a human gets turned into a vampire, they essentially are the same person, but now they have a bit more aggressive tendencies, and now they have to feed on humans to survive, and that kind of changes them to look down on humans, and now they're also stronger than humans, and humans are hunting them down. So they are essentially the same person, but now they are going to have to be acting different, and they'll be treated differently. So you could have good characters that could become vampires, and it's a bit more endearing now because it's not just a elven soul taking them over and it's just using their body. No, it's still them. Now they've just been slightly changed, and over time would change a lot, but still as a whole be the same person. So I think that would be great instead of some great conflicts. Like, say, for example, if Magna became a vampire, Magna could become quite strong if he became a vampire. I mean, like I said, it would be boosting his physical stats. He needs a mana boost, and then it boosts his mana control. And so, also, you just keep Magna. Imagine a vampire Magna versus Luck. That could be quite an emotional fight. And it would be, I guess, a rehash of what already happened, but I think that you could do a bunch of other differences, and I don't think Magna would necessarily have to fight Luck, but somebody with weaker mana. But this would be something that I could see happening in Black Clover, which would be, I guess, vampires. And one thing also with vampires is that they are essentially immortal once they become one, as in they don't really age as long as they feed. They can still be killed, but they just don't really age. And this leads credence to the possibility of a vampire wizard who is just unstoppable, because he's not, not only is he just a vampire, so he has more magic and he has more physical stats, but he has a near infinite supply of spells, because he's several hundred years old, maybe 1,000 years old or whatever. He's been around for so long, his grimoire is just full of spells because he doesn't die. He just keeps getting more and more. He gets stronger as time goes on because he trains, or because he consumes mana and he consumes life energy by eating people's blood. And then he just gets more and more and more and more spells because he's just lived so long. Or I guess it could be a she as well. Vampires can be male or female. But so I think that also something that they can do with vampires is that essentially almost kind of like how devils work, is that if you become a vampire, you get a second magic type, but I think that would be like everybody gets the same second magic type. Like every vampire would get like blood magic or something like that, or their own magic type that they normally had would become like a blood variation. Like if, for example, Magna became a vampire, he would have like fire blood magic or something like that, or combined fire with blood, and that's kind of like what his new magic type was. And then, so I think that is something that could, happen. I think it would be really interesting to see how Asta and Co would go against a vampire threat. And this is something that I think would maybe have to be a little bit more down the line. After all these devils are dealt with, we get like a different threat, a more human threat, maybe from a different country, and then the vampires come in, and it would be a slow build. Maybe you could be over a multiple arc thing, where this is like something that's happening in the background of like, people are going missing. Oh, why is this guy only come out at night now? And something like that, and just build it up slowly over time, and maybe have some characters who are secretly vampires, and then it's finally revealed when the arc starts. So one thing is that Tabata has taken so many inspirations from Norse mythology, and there's actually a mythic parallel in Norse mythology to the vampire. Now, again, it's a mythic parallel, it doesn't mean they are 100% equivalent, but they do have a lot of similarities, and that is the Draugr. Now, a Draugr would almost be like if you combined a zombie and a vampire. It's not the best, I guess, example, but it's still, they have a lot of similarities as to they're essentially a living dead, kind of like how a vampire is. They're also, they consume blood, and they, kill people, and they're just like, I guess, horrifying creatures like a vampire is supposed to be. So if the vampires were introduced and they were more like, I guess, classic vampires, he could still, if Tabata introduced them, just call them Draugr to keep the more Norse reference, and they could just act more like vampires, or they could act like Draugr, or somewhere in the middle. But I think that adding in vampires would be a great thing in Black Clover. It could lead to a massive war, and it's another kind of like infiltration thing, kind of with the elves, how the Clover Kingdom lost one of their best armies in the Golden Dawn because elves took them over. This could, I guess, kind of be the same thing, is it'd be like an army of their own soldiers going against them because they got turned into vampires. So I think that Black Clover vampires could be quite cool, and it would be another cool thing to see with forbidden magic, with dark arts and all of that. So I think that Tabata, it would be a really good idea for him to add vampires, as long as it's doable. But a lot of people are saying that this might be the final arc of Black Clover because it's kind of feeling that way. I kind of am 60-40. I think it's a bit more likely than it isn't. I think that it's a bit more likely that this isn't the final arc, but I still think there is a lot of signs showing that Black Clover might be over sooner than we had expected. Some people are saying that Black Clover would go as long as One Piece, which actually is a misquote, and then some people say it'd go along as Naruto, which is also a sort of misquote, as he said that he could essentially write Black Clover as long as Naruto, not that he would or should. And we're at 270 chapters now. I could see maybe this arc ending in 1.5 to 2 years, because you have a lot. We have Asta needing to train, Yuno needing to train, Noelle needing to train, and maybe some other training for the other people. And then we're going to have the Dark Triad still to defeat, and then 10 more devils, and it's probably going to take a long time to go through. A long time. I'm sure that going against the 10 Cliff-Off devils is going to be by far the longest fight in Black Clover. So you could easily be another 70 to 100 chapters before the series is over, and that rounds up to a 340 to a 370 chapter series, and maybe it ends there. And the reason why is that Black Clover, it still sells well, but it's been reduced in sales. Like, I believe it was 2018, it was the 11th highest selling manga in the world, and that's pretty good. And then I think last year it wasn't even for 2019, it wasn't even the top 20, and then it's not going to be the top 20 again, I believe, for 2020. So its sales are going down. It still is successful, especially its anime. Its anime still makes a lot of money, but if the manga sales are going down, it's not a great sign that this could go as long as Naruto or One Piece. And there's only been one video game. The mobile game got canceled, and then there's been no movie yet. There is a reliable source who did say there's going to be a live-action project, but then again, it's one source, and while he is reliable, he's not 100% accurate. I think it's more like that source is like a guy who's like 70 to 80% accurate, so it might not even really be a thing. So there are some signs going that Black Clover can be ending, and one of the other signs is just within the actual manga itself. We now know who the anti-magic devil is. We now know what happened and how he got the grimoire. We now know essentially why who Asta's mom is, and what happened to her, and why Asta had no magic. So we have all these questions that are now getting answered. like I said, we know who Asta's mom is. We know why Asta has no magic. We know who the anti-magic devil is. We know that why he's in the grimoire, and we know how the anti-magic power manifested. So almost all of these questions have been answered now. So that's why a lot of people are thinking that this is the final arc, because what other questions are there to answer? Now, again, this doesn't have to be a thing. You could just have all these mysteries answered now and still continue with the series, but it does somewhat seem like Black Clover might end a bit sooner. But then again, I still think that it's more likely that it will keep continuing past this arc than not. I just also am a bit more now on the side. Like, if you asked me maybe a year ago when this arc was just starting, I would say that Black Clover would go on. It was maybe an 80 to 90% chance it would go as long as Naruto. Whereas now, I'm saying it's like a 60% chance, and it might even be more like a 55% or a 51% chance, just because the Black Clover manga sales have gone down a lot, as it reached its peak in 2018, and it's just gone down in back-to-back years. But hopefully, this is not the final arc, and we do get something after, maybe vampires or some other horrifying threats, werewolves maybe. But I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts down below. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hope you guys all have an amazing day. Plus...